in your personal opinion, would you rather eat like take the promotion and then you have those responsibilities now yours, or would you take the small like raise but then have like that ability to do like the management position or like the leadership position of like that of like now you have like a little team beneath you? Hey everyone, I'm Yash and this is Think and Drink Podcast, episode 4. Today we're going to be talking about managing up leadership, management, working for someone, having an old boss, who knows. And I'm joined by my co-host, Ryan Cadby. Hey Ryan.
Glad to be here. Yeah, excited for this topic. Um, yeah, I think this should be good. I have a couple other things I'd love to run through too. But happy to start there. I did a little Googling. Well, actually, first thing that popped up into my head when I started thinking about this topic was um, I'm on TikTok, dude, and I'm on all these like not corporate accounts, but like these corporate like meme accounts almost where they mock just like the corporate life. And there's this one girl who does the her act your wage bit where like
Mm.
she just comes in and acts like a toddler, and basically like it's all like skitted, so it's like a little skit she wrote, but she's basically just combating like this idea of like doing extra work, staying doing overtime, like going above and beyond, and basically saying like you have to pay me more for me to want to do that. Um, which I mean, I get, but there's also a part of me that's like, okay, you gotta try a little bit, right? Like you gotta put the work in to get where you want to go. So this whole like act your wage movement is pretty ridiculous. Or like this silent, oh, what'd they call it? It's like silent
Ghost
quitting.
quitting? Ghost
Yeah,
quitting?
yeah.
I
I don't know if I agree with this.
so like a lot of those things I can see like in the world of like near minimum wage or like you're working for like a quick serve restaurant or you're working at like a restaurant and the management expects you to like you show up and beyond like your actual duties you do like all of these extra things like, oh, I need you to close up tonight, I need you to do like this and then clean out these blah 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 blah, and they're not getting paid for like those extra things that are taking like significant hours of their time, and it's like, oh wow, like this is like I have to do an extra 2 hours after my shift of all this extra work. um and I can see that being like, hey, act your wage, right? Like that makes sense, right? Because they're just kind of getting screwed. I think maybe in the corporate world there's a little bit more, I guess, like return on the investment of like that extra work, where if you are going a little bit above and beyond, you do get to do those things. Um, but I will say like you you can't, like, I don't think you can just work, do extra, and it'll like pay out for you. Like you have to be doing extra in the right places, because I what I've seen is it's like your manager and like the people above your manager, they only care about like X, Y, and Z. And if you're like working hard in like something that like just doesn't matter to them, then it's like great. They can see you can work hard, but like that's not something they're gonna like, oh, I'm gonna give you a promotion for working on that. They're like, yeah, whatever. Like you did great. Like thanks. I'm not gonna be ungrateful, but they're just not, it's not gonna be moving the needle for them. And so that's like how I would think about that. I also did look into like, managing up or whatever it is, and one thing that was really interesting that I had never thought about in like the space of like managing up or like understanding like your role was like, I guess this is like part of it, but basically it's from Pam Fox Rowland, and it's in her book 42 Rules for Your New Leadership Role. And it says like many flameouts can be traced to missteps during their first quarter. More importantly, for the 60 to 75% of leaders that survive into second year, one third fail within the first year. These leaders' effectiveness and trajectory are powerfully affected by choices made in the first year. So essentially, what this lady is talking about, Pam, is that when you, whatever job it is, whether you're the leader or whether you're working someone underneath them, you should like very clearly understand what you're hired to do, like what your role is meant to be, and then using that like scope as like what you should be like going above and beyond on. If you find like areas of improvement in your job and your role, and you're like, oh, like these are all the great ways you can do it, but they kind of fall out of the scope of what you're supposed to be doing, then those aren't things that are worth actually, pursuing. They might be helping the business and driving value, but they're not going to be driving enough value in the right places that's going to get you to like wherever your end state is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think part of this comes down to like your job description, right? Like a well-defined job description, like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm closing up every night, but and I'm mad about it because I'm technically not getting paid for it. Um, but like if that was in your job description and the expectation was set, like that would be a very clear requirement from the beginning. Um, but yeah, that's like that whole managing up, like you need metrics to basically judge your work on, right? So if there are these, if your job description has 5 bullet points, like you should be checking those marks on, I don't know, like I don't know what a good basis would be. Like one-on-ones or what, like a monthly basis or sometimes weekly. So
Yeah,
yeah, you probably just go down that checklist. So you're moving the needle in the right places, like you're saying. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't know if or did you have something else you wanted to say on that?
no,
Because I was, when this topic kind of came to my mind, I was talking to a buddy who was upset with leadership, and basically they're these very specialized in their field, so they were expert like engineers in their field, and they started a company together. So my buddy recognized that they're like young leaders and new to building a business, so he feels it as kind of a manager of a team in the company, where he's like, yeah, he's like, I try and do things, but they change the process like every couple months. It's hard to keep up, and it's hard to like help myself and my team adapt to these new changing standards. Um, and like he just had some insights that I think would have been extremely valuable to a business owner. And I was like, dude, you should like, I think there's a great opportunity here to like help add value to the business where they might have a blind spot, right? And if you can leverage your knowledge, even though you're a subordinate technically, like you're reporting to them, um, you can leverage your knowledge to both improve your life in the job, right, and improve the business.
hmm. And I think where sometimes people go wrong in being put in this situation is like when I think you made a great point. One is like you could totally be selfish about this and be like wanting to do this because it makes your life better, right? Like that's like should be totally a driver for you. But the other way I've noticed, like especially with people who are highly like skilled in their field, like multiple years within it, like they can recognize themselves that they're experts in their field. And if they're your leadership that you have to like work with, is you is being able to present a solution first before you present the problem, and be able to before you say like, hey, this stuff sucks, it's like, hey guys, like this is like a really great way I've been thinking about doing things. I already have it like 80% of the way implemented. I just kind of need your like buy-in so I can like do the rest of it. Like if you can like do that, like, and that's like a great example of like the extra work are going above and beyond that it would be valuable to you and your company. That would they like, hey, like you could get like promotions, or like you'll easily put like a little gold star next to your name. Is like, hey, you saw that problem, you not only saw it, but you like solved for it as well. And then you present it like if you like a lot of the times if you do solve this situation, and like if you do need some sort of oversight to like finish the job, then that's when you go ask for it. But I think like if you present the solution first, I would find it hard to believe that many leaders or managers would be upset with you, especially if it's like already like 90% of the way solved.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Like coming with a plan, I think is a big part of this. But like I still think even if you don't know the plan, like even if you like let's say you have a one-on-one with your managers and you're like, "Hey, look, I feel like, changing our standards every 2 months is difficult for a company to like scale quickly. It's making sales more difficult, whatever your pitch is. And then you get the okay to even create a plan. So you're not sinking hours into something that could potentially fall flat. I think there's a gray area there, right? I agree. I would probably want to come with a plan, or at least like a half baked plan. Be like, what are your thoughts? What would you change here? Um, but yeah, dude, I'm just thinking like I wish someone could tell me things that I was doing wrong in my career or in school. Like looking back, I wish people would just offer that information more freely. Because then it'd be like, okay, that's even if you don't want to respect their plan or what they're saying, it's like, okay, that's valuable insight. Maybe I don't agree or I only agree with parts of it, but I think it's yeah.
It's
I
but
think there
the
should
issue
be
with
more of an open dialogue there.
yeah, and I think like it's just hard for like a lot of people to like it's like giving feedback, right? Like it's like saying like, hey, like I think this could be done better or whatever it is, and I think it's so everyone is so used to um like kind of people not being able to separate their like personality from business. And like if they give feedback, they're scared they're gonna like upset at someone or like step on their toes or like they're just gonna get triggered or something. It's like that like usually prevents that feedback. So I'd agree like so much in time, especially when I was like learning what I was doing. I was like itching for feedback. I'm like, no, tell me why that sucked. 'Cause I know it did. I just don't have the right words to like actually say why it sucked. Like I know it didn't feel good. I just need from your perspective why it sucked. Like, but I will say that I've had that experience, but then I've also been in the position to like give people feedback, and I also catch myself saying, oh like I don't want to like hurt this person's feeling. Like I don't know if I'm going to be like too nitpicky with my feedback. Be like, well, you could have done this tiny little bit piece better. But I don't know. The more I think about it, like I think as long as you're coming from a place of like wanting to better that person, then feedback's always good.
Yeah. Yeah, and having like a shared goal. So like working towards the same goal, I think is really valuable there.
Yeah,
But
definitely. I
yeah,
I think kind of going back to your point, half baked plan, always having a plan, half baked, or just an idea of how to solve for it. I just think it's like the most open. It's like the most like open way you can approach anything. If you just say, "Hey guys, like I've already kind of this is like this is how I'm thinking about it. This is what I was thinking we could do," and you present it as like, especially if you have like bosses or people who are experts in the field, it gives them an opportunity to like not like crap on your like solution or whatever, but it gives them like a structure to like go in and say, oh well, like actually I think we could do it this way, right? Especially if it's a small business, because chances are if they are changing business processes, they're changing these things all the time. There's maybe a good reason for it, and you just need that insight, and that'll help you with your own plan and solving for things as well. So I
yeah,
think always having at least a half baked plan, it will probably never do you harm in like any type of situation.
yeah, yeah. Plus, it's easier to edit something than it is to like come up with like
Mm,
idea generation is so much harder than just coming in and editing something. So yeah, I think your idea to have a plan is probably a key ingredient there.
yeah.
I also thought it was when I was thinking about this, I thought it was interesting when I think it was you that was talking about like visibility for your work. Um, so like this idea kind of along the same vein of like managing up, but like essentially when you're managing up, you want more control over like your work life, right? So it's like the next evolution of that is like moving into management and basically growing in your role. And you were talking about like visibility for your work. I think that was you.
Yeah.
Um, and having a manager that believes in giving giving credit where credit's due. Um, so I was like, I don't know how you would make someone do that though. Like if you like how do you tell your manager like, hey, show this to your superiors?
Well, I think a lot of the time, right, like um really bad managers are like almost fictitious, right? Like a really truly like a manager who does not want the best for you, right? Is like I very few and far between. I think a lot of managers want the best for you, it's just they don't have the tools or like the process to do that, and so you have to kind of set them up. And so a great way is like if you're doing like what I was talking to you about was wanting to have like having a manager who's like when you're doing great work. For me, like I find it very difficult to like to move up the corporate world. There's a couple things you need to do. Great work, you need to then go in and make sure people are seeing your work and doing all of that, and like and seeing the impact. But like I like to do great work. That's awesome. I know most people probably like to do work that's like fulfilling or like they feel like they're excelling at. But I think the tooting your own horn part of it and saying like, "Hey guys, like check out this great thing I did." I struggle with that. I'm like, I just that's not part of my like thing of wanting to do that. I'd rather move on to like the next project and like get other stuff done. Um, and so I find that when you have like when I have had a really great boss recently, is like not only am I able just to like offhand just say hey I've been like doing this like work putting a lot of hours. He'll like take it and then make sure it's like I don't know how he does it, if it's in his one-on-ones with his boss or with like whatever. It's just getting like highlighted offhand, right? Like, oh, this great work's being done over here, and like this is what they're doing and like the approach or whatever it is. And I think like it's just like that subtle visibility. It's not like shoving it down people's throats that you're like, hey, like look at this stuff like that's being done. But it is having a manager or coaching the manager to say like, hey, like you are doing this great stuff. And I don't think that is being done elsewhere. Like if you didn't have a manager who was doing this for you, I think that could be a great way. It's like, hey, I don't think this is being done like elsewhere, or I thought of this as like a new way or a different way of approaching like whatever process it is. Because then it's like your manager would be incentivized to maybe share it a little bit more because they also want others to do it, right? They want the process to be a little bit faster or more efficient.
Mm, yeah, that's interesting. Dude, that's a fine line to walk though. I was in that position a couple years ago where I was like we were running updates on something, or there was like some I was building out a feature I think for one of these web apps, and I was like, look, I think we're headed down the wrong path here. Um or no, it was maintenance. So we basically all these were like WordPress websites, and we had to make sure our proprietary plugin was compatible with all these WordPress plugins, and they update so frequently that we had to continually like validate our plugin against them. But there was no like system to it. There was no process. It was just like whenever the web admins were like, hey, there's a security leak, like we need to patch this soon, then it was like, okay, let's like start looking at this. And it was such a headache every time. So I pitched this process of like managing our plugin against all these other plugins, but it was going to be a lot more work for other people and not me. And that was that was the harder pitch, because it was like it was like this system is better for me, maybe not for everyone else, but it was also beneficial for the product. So I was like, dang, I don't know how I can pitch this nicely.
You
Um,
can't.
yeah.
Oh, so what happened?
Um, my my senior at the time, whoever was above me, was like they had some edits or something. We ended up dividing the work amongst the developers and the web admins. So we came to like a middle ground by choice of who was above me. Um, so it like went over fine after, because I shared it with her before I shared it with the team, because I needed her kind of like stamp of approval first, and we needed direction. So like she had to basically tell everyone what to do, so I couldn't just come in and start telling people what to do. So but yeah, she approved it, and then she kind of distributed it. But she was like, "Hey, yeah, Ryan had this idea," and I was like, "Oh God!" But it ended up going over fine. I think everyone kind of understood once we started doing it. They're like, "Okay, this makes sense. Like it's a little more work, but it's more like it's a lot easier to track in the long term, and it's a little more efficient. At least efficient to maintain."
So like that's like a great example of that point of earlier, right? Which is like providing the solution basically almost fully baked, and then going to your boss and then saying like, hey, like I think this will be more effective. It took an ad hoc scenario of like you just randomly would have to like do maintenance for 2, and then you made it a little bit more predictive, even though it had a little bit more work included. You were able to like put some scheduling around it, understand when things are going to happen, and that in the long term is usually just a better process.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great summary. Yeah, it was a better process, even though it was more work, but it was more predictable. So, yeah. Yeah, pitching stuff. Yeah, maybe go to your senior first and see what they say before telling the team what to do.
Especially if you are going to be giving people work to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I yeah, I think like it's even though like it's you're giving other people work to do, I do think that at the end of the day it is a job, right? Like it's like you don't like I get not everyone wants to show up and do like work all the time when you're there, but like the work is there and it's supposed to be done and it's like adds value that I think it just should be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I was at or on the same vein of kind of like um acting your wage, whatever, managing up. I think in the same vein I was thinking of like when to ask for a raise and kind of like how long to stay at a job. Um and I think your criteria of working on things that move the needle is like great ammunition for asking for a raise.
Yeah.
Um but someone else was telling me they ask for a raise every month. And I was like I was like, "Oh my god." I feel like that devalues the ask. It's like, are you serious this time? Do you really want to raise, or I don't know. You
Well,
know what I mean?
I think you can like if you have it on like your one-on-one docket. One sec. Um, can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have it on your like one-on-one docket of hey, like, am I moving towards getting this raise? Right? Like, I think that's different. But like, I do
Mm.
think there's a middle ground between asking like every time you see your boss, and then not asking at all. Because like sometimes you could be doing great work, you could be recognized, it could be valuable work. But then like your boss might be like, the company might not have any expectations to be giving out raises, right? And then like when you show up and ask, and you have like your laundry list of things that you've done great, and they're like, yeah, we're just not doing that this quarter or like this, this year. Then you're gonna be like left. So I think like how to ask for raises and promotions is like an ongoing conversation and like where your expectations are. So if you're new to a thing, I don't know if you should ask this maybe your first quarter, but like maybe in the second quarter you ask like, hey, like what's the like career progression? Like what is like the normal amount of time that it takes to go from like one step to the other step? And then from there you could start to map out like, hey, like what would be the qualities that are involved at each of those steps? Like what does it mean to be like an analyst versus an associate versus like a partner, let's say, right? And then from there, you could start to work on those qualities and see, and then you can maybe accelerate that timeline, right? Now, where the issue could start to stem from is if you basically accelerate the timeline and they're like, well, you just have to wait your turn, right? Then it's like, well, now that's an issue, right? Because no longer are you not providing value at the higher levels. You're doing like all these great things, but you're just waiting. Um, and so that could definitely come up and be an issue. But I think it should just be an open conversation that's like ongoing. Expectations of like, hey, I'm thinking about this. You start your year by the end of the year. I hope they do have good work that I would be like up for promotion or for a raise by the end of the year. And then you like have your checkpoints throughout the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's more structure to it in corporate. So like bigger companies, right, where there are kind of raise schedules or promotion schedules. They have like very clear budgets for promotions and um, commissions, maybe even. But yeah, I think at smaller companies, it's a little less, there's more ambiguity, right? Because it's like,
Yeah,
oh, well,
yeah,
like we didn't really hit the numbers we wanted, or whatever it is. Like there just isn't money there sometimes, right? In a small business. So Yeah, I think it can be more of a conversation. It can always be a conversation, but I think the conversation is more impactful in a smaller business where also your absence might have a greater impact and your presence, right? Like your value add to the company would be felt more broadly if you were to stay or leave. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. Dude, is my video
I
breaking up?
it it was a little bit, but I think it's
Okay,
good.
good.
Um, for the small companies though, I kind of feel like the metric are like what you can use to like understand whether maybe it's worth the raise is like responsibility like creep. If like if you're working in a company and like all of a sudden like it's like oh you've started like when you started you only did 5 things and now you're doing 10 things. Okay, where the hell did those 10 things go? Come from? I'm like, did they do it? Now, granted, like I think being able to say like, hey, like I'm doing 5 extra things, based on like how the business is doing, is there any like is there can I have any expectation for like a raise or promotion? Right? I think you could have that conversation because then that's being realistic, right? Like it's like saying, hey, you know what? I understand that I have a lot of in like impact to like business, and like the business is only so big that if it doesn't do well, we can't be like moving around money. So like that changes things. So I think you can have that conversation, but looking at like the level of the amount of responsibilities you had and what you do currently, and then also we're talking to your boss about it, like, hey, look, like it's just like I'm doing the work of another person essentially, like, and my like salary doesn't reflect that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And that also opens up the conversation for like, okay, maybe you don't get a raise, or maybe you get a marginal raise and then we hire like an outsource partner or we get an intern to start doing some of the work that is lower impact, like busy work maybe or whatever it is. But it's like, okay, maybe that brings up a potential problem to solve for leadership where it's like, all right, you're right. We did add 5 things. We didn't think these would be ongoing, but they seem to be like these are now routine things you're doing. Let's put a system in place and solve this problem. Um, so yeah, I like your way of phrasing it. I think that's a good way to phrase it. It's like, what is the expectation for a raise in the future? Like, based on this, like, is there a potential? It's very like non-confrontational. It's like in the future, which that's always easy for someone to talk about. Then like if you put them on the spot, you're like, "Hey, I've been doing this, this, and this. Like, give me a raise right now, or I'm leaving." That's a
Yeah.
little like, okay. um,
Do you would you like so like let's say you're working in a small, you're no longer running the show, right? You work for a small company or something like that, or even a big one. In your personal opinion, would you rather eat like take the promotion and then you have those responsibilities now yours, or would you take the small like raise but then have like that ability to do like the management position or like the leadership position of like that of like now you have like a little team beneath you?
mm, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. It probably depends on the type of work. If it's work I want to get better at, like I think I know where you're headed with this. It's like, do you prioritize like learning over money? Which was actually one of my notes too. So I don't know. I think it would be fun to manage. I think it'd be fun to, or not manage, but um, yeah, I mean, like help organize a team. I think there is benefit there. To me, right now, I would find that interesting. Unless the work was like super dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say interesting for a reason. Language choice there is intentional. I don't think it would be particularly fun. I think it'd be educational, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, it's already been educational working with outsource partners. It's like there are no assumptions that they are making. It's like they'll do exactly what you say, but you have to say exactly what you want for it to work. I think that's how managing is sometimes, if I were
Yeah.
to guess. Yeah.
I would agree. I would
Yeah.
agree. You find the it's like just no assumptions at all.
Yeah. What would you
Yeah,
do? Would
I
you take
think
the
like
manager?
I would say like it depends, like you said, depends on the role. If it was like if I saw a like an eventual future in which my part of that management, if like what I was getting, if what I was like making that team to do was gonna start to grow to be like a big size of the business, then for sure. Like if I'm like like 15, 20 years ago, if like you're the person who started like to manage the website at like a big company, and like websites were nothing, and then like, hey guys, like, I really need just like one extra person, like, yeah, I would stick that out, right? Because I know like where websites are gonna be in like 15 years, and then next thing you know, I'm the fucking like CMO of that company, and like you grow into it. um and so like if that was the case in which I'm like starting to need help in a like a new like an emerging part of the business, and it's not like back office like processes, then yeah, I would probably take the management. But if it's like more back office processes, or it's like working on stuff that we've always been doing, but like we've just been getting more business of it, then I might want to do it on my own, because chances are I'm going to be able to do it a little more efficiently than like the startup time of hiring someone, getting them up to speed, and then getting them proficient at it. Like that just might not be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's also, yeah, like what skill is going to be more valuable to you in the future? It's like, okay, this is a company I believe in. I do want to walk up the ladder here. This is like a step in the right direction. Or it's like, no, the work I'm doing now, like if I become highly technical in this specific task, that skill is going to be more valuable to me when I look for another job in a year or whatever it is. Um, so yeah, I think that's a great point.
I'm also hooked on the idea of growing a team. I think like if you can put on your like skills list of like growing a like taking a team of yourself and then growing that out and then hitting your like goals and leading them to like be efficient, like do that. I think if you could like get really good at that skill, you could be successful no matter where you go. Being able to pick and choose people out of a line, saying like, this is where we need to go, this is what we need to do, this is how we're gonna do it. Like that's like a very enticing experience to me though. It's like I want to know what does it take to do that like efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, you would need the backing, dude. It like you need the backing of a good company to draw good talent though. Cuz there's only so much you can do with picking. Sure, there's a line to pick from, but it's like, okay, are these really even like is this do I have good options here? So yeah, if you're in a company that draws good talent, I think building a team could be really exciting. But if you're working with, you know, like I hate to bring it
I'm
up again,
thinking,
dude, just a bunch of dude, I'm thinking comm majors. It's just gonna turn into the roast of comm majors.
oh god, I was thinking like the scene in Wolf of Wall Street where he's like calling up all of his buddies, like to be in. There's a bunch of like random salesmen that he's like known throughout the year. The one dude who's like sits in his grandma's yard, like pumping weights, hitting on like high schoolers. That's the
Yeah,
workforce. That is the workforce you're picking from.
exactly, dude. Like I don't know if I can grow a team from that, but yeah, I think that skill set would be seen as really valuable by, I mean, other companies, and yeah, I think that'd be cool. And it's prideful, dude. I think building a team is also kind of like an ego thing,
Hmm. Well,
which
okay.
isn't a
Well,
bad thing.
why do you say that? Is it's like it's like a selfish but also like selfless type of act where it's like, oh, I'm doing it for the team, but at the end of the day, it's like your name on the team kind of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's well, it's the same thing. It's the same reason people go and work for themselves. I'm no like I'm not saying that I'm no better than this. It's an ego thing. It's like, no, I know I can do this better than you. You know? It's like that's why you want to be in charge of the team, cuz you're like, no, I know how it needs to be done and I'm willing to tell people how it needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, I think that ego is like necessary, right? Like I don't think you can by any means like be Be able to not think your process, your thing is better, and it's better because you're doing it as well to be successful. You got to have like that level of confidence for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I was getting coffee with Ben this morning, and he was we were he brought me on to work on a client of his a while ago. And we go back and forth about it. I'll text him about stuff. Just he has like 3 or 4 different websites, so I just help him manage those. But um, he's in this position where so he does like live streaming of like workout classes and stuff. So he has like a whole his whole company's built around that. So but he's tied to this platform called Uscreen. And dude, it's held together right now. At least his instance is held together with like duct tape and bubble gum. Like I don't touch that thing. It's barely standing. And but the company's still in business, right? So he's stuck in this situation where like he's tied to this platform. He's grandfathered in at a great pricing, but it's just a terrifying platform to work with. So him and I were talking about kind of this idea of like building a SaaS startup or, just having like side projects. And it's like, okay, do you now reflecting on his current situation? So this workout class guy's current situation, he stood that up because it was the fastest way to get to production. He was like, this is the tool. It's going to do everything for me. They'll host the videos. They'll push it to an iPhone app that has my name on it. It's like all integrated, super easy, but it sucks to work with. So um, we were like, dang, thinking about that. It's like when you're building your little startup or your little side project, um, do you go with the tool that's going to be the most robust down the line when you need to scale? Or do you build with like the product that's going to get you to production the fastest, get you to MVP the fastest? And yeah, it was kind of it because I've always been in the camp of like, all right, just get to production, you can fix it later. But dude, after looking at his site and what it would take to fix it and like get him over to another product, oh, it'd be such a headache and so expensive.
Yeah, it's right. So you have to basically factor that into like your total cost of ownership of these platforms. If you go with like a more robust platform and in the beginning it costs you more in developer resources because you have to customize it a little bit more, or you have to basically develop it out a little bit more, but it gives you really strong foundation and bones to like do that. Or if you go with like a more integrated platform and it's like it does everything, but then long down the return, like it's just not going to be able to support you, but it's cheaper and it gets you there. Like, what's your total cost of ownership of both of those platforms, right? And if eventually that like lift is crazy, then you're gonna have to eat that bullet one way or another. But that's just a fact. It's just you have to prepare yourself for that fact. I mean, a lot of the companies I work with, they run into this. They have these on-premise platforms that are like built off their own infrastructure and their own like little public clouds or their own clouds that they have, and it is just like an unwieldy mess. Like they have been building like just off of it for like 10 plus years. No one has ever checked on them to say like whether they're doing something the right way. They have been just doing it, whatever works, throwing money at it. And then like, well, like look, let's go move to this new platform. It's SaaS, it's beautiful, it's like, all the bells and whistles, and like we take a look under the hood and it's like, what the heck happened in here, dude? It'll be like if you had a car that's like, you sold a car to them, it's a diesel, and then you open the hood and it's like half electric, half like, running off like cornstarch. That's what they're doing. It's like, well, wait, why? Why did you do this? It's essentially what's happening. And so they run into that issue, which is like, it's not even the cost of the new platform that's the issue. It's the cost of moving it. Is the cost of moving it and then getting to that new platform worth my while? And the way we have to sometimes position it is your long run like cost like over 5 years of this new platform will be so much cheaper due to like maintenance, due to like all of these operational stuff that you're having to do today to just keep your stuff up and running. That goes away, right? So yes, you eat this massive cost of migration. But what we also caution them to do is saying, hey, you're basically moving out of a house that you've grown up in and that you've completely outgrown. And part of that outgrowing is you have a bunch of stuff laying around inside of your house that you actually don't need as well. So when you make this migration in your move, this is a great time to like clear out those cobwebs, to clear out like all the things you don't actually need to be doing all day. Like look, take a good look and do that. So that's like one way I've been approaching it.
Mm.
But it totally is an issue. Is it's like how do you like? It's a timing thing. Like when do you make? Because you're also when you have that old platform, every day you keep it alive is another dollar sunk into something that you're not going to be using. Your technical debt goes through the roof, right? You're just creating
Yep.
debt for yourself. But then you also have to save enough money to like make this migration. It's like remodeling your house. Like it's literally like remodeling your house. It's like not only are you having to like go in and like pay for like all the fun things you want to do, but then you also have to like budget in like the cost of like when this project scope and increases, which it will. There's just no way it's like done in a proper like it's just going to increase. Just
Yeah.
like you're it's just like remodeling your house. It's going to increase, and so it's like fuck. What do you do?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's the money's going to be spent anyways, right? It's just over what time duration is it going to be spent. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess when you're factoring in like quarterly budgets or like, if you're going to make your numbers or you got to report to your investors, whatever it is, that can be a factor of the equation. But, um, dude, when you say timing though, I also think of it as timing in like, okay, when do you make the decision on how robust your platform needs to be? Like, if you have a SaaS app you want to get started stat and you can get it working with WordPress, like do you do that or do you just go like balls to the wall, go like a full like MERN stack app and like spend 6 months 6 months building this, or like fully robust though, fully scalable, not a problem you'll have to deal with later, where like WordPress you're going to need to fix that pretty quick, like if you're starting to see like high load or whatever it is. um
I think you got to get to market.
I agree.
You go, what if you have it 6 months and you build this super robust fucking app and there's no one there to use it? Who needs scalability at that point, right? Like, it
Exactly.
just doesn't matter. You're
I
SOL.
agree.
You're SOL, right? Like, it's just, I, but there has to be a middle ground. A platform that is like, or like, I guess, how, like, if you ran, like, your apps, like, in a full, like, headless manner, and you
That's
just,
yeah. Well, yeah, so Ben's situation today, I don't want to talk about it because he's working on it with some, he might, I don't know if he has an NDA or something, but I won't mention it here. But basically it could be done with a headless instance of WordPress. So you just use the WordPress as a backend, your CMS, and then you just expose everything through an API. And then you can have a robust front end. So your front end can move around, and basically anything you need to make more robust down the line is simply like a data infrastructure data, like it's a data problem.
mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, move away from WordPress, change our schema a little bit. Might change, I have to change the API a little bit, but at least then your front end is completely independent. You might, okay, you have to change the way it consumes it maybe a little bit, but like, I think it's a lot. So I agree. I think there is a middle ground sometimes, but yeah, get to market. I agree. Just see if people want it.
It's like get to market, but then I also think that's like we're having the like maybe a technical background or confidence and like your like a CTO or someone there to be able to say like it's I think where people run into the issue is like they get to market and they didn't know that this was going to be an issue later on. If you knew that like what your decision you were choosing was going to be like a pain in the ass in like 5 years if things go well, then chances are you might not always be investing so heavily back into that platform again. Right? Like I think where people go wrong is like they didn't really think that oh this would become some unwieldy beast. They figured it would just be the solution for them. So they keep putting money and they keep doing like these things that like end up making it worse and worse. But if you always knew in the back of your mind that like oh, we're eventually going to get off this platform, but we just need to get there, then like that might be a little bit more helpful. And having like someone who
Mm,
has that vision for you and says like, ah, like guys, we really can't be doing that right now because this is just gonna really kill us. If it's not like essential to getting like getting it out there, getting it to production, then like let's just not be doing that at the moment.
yeah. Or maybe even maybe like I think the technical knowledge is of value there, and maybe it's not um just the plan on moving away from some, or it is part of the plan, but maybe you build in like a ripcord. It's like,
Mm,
okay, I know based on like the WordPress schema that like when we try and port this data over to like our own SQL database, like these tags might get messed up. So maybe we implement like an alternate like UUID system. So when it does port, like this will be our new record keeping like system.
dude, that's so funny. You said ripcord. It threw me back because same exact like thing. Activision Blizzard, they make World of Warcraft. They released this new patch to Blizzard, like to World of Warcraft, a while back, and they knew it was gonna be a little hot and like a little controversial, and it was. It was released, and it was absolutely terrible, and not at all like what the players wanted. There was backlash, whatever, and like one of the main devs, he like kind of just like hinted like, oh well, like we could always pull the ripcord. And then it became this huge trending thing. Pull the ripcord, pull the
Oh
ripcord.
God.
But like that is like a total viable like thing. If you know what you're about to do is like, oh, this might like you're putting insurance back into it. When in their case, it happened to be like reverting back to like a different version of the game, which was like a more likable one, and that was what it would take. Is like they had to pull a ripcord to do that. But like, but then I guess the question to that ripcord piece is the like time spent like adding that insurance piece to it worth it? And then if you're adding insurance to these decisions, should you be making these decisions?
Right. It would have to be a small enough lift for it to be like you're if you're already settling on a middle ground, it's like, okay, what's like our lowest barrier to making this scalable? It's like, okay, yeah, new UUID, we just add another data point to every entry in our database and we're good. Um, but yeah, maybe it's like, okay, maybe that's the solution. Maybe we don't even need to build it in now. Maybe like when we do want to switch, we just have a script go through, it adds a UUID to all of our records, and then we just port them over. I don't know. I think that's going to be unique to every like situation, but yeah, I like ripcord too. I was using that word earlier today. It's probably going to be a nice hot word in my vocab for the next like 2 weeks. Um,
Ripcords.
yeah, dude, building in ripcords. I've got one more thing I could run through if you want to keep going,
Yeah,
or do
let's
you have
run through
stuff
it.
you want to? Did you have something you wanted to cover?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Um, and this kind of, I don't know if our audio was messed up on our podcast from the other week, but this is kind of like similar to what we were talking about there. So this idea of scaling, and there's a studio. So studio my buddy works at, they do like killer work, like super high design, get just huge contracts, mainly for the design. It's not like they're not doing crazy functionality stuff. It's mostly just like animations and just really sexy websites. My buddy was saying their plan to scale is to they're starting to track their time more closely. So like every designer and developer needs to track their time more closely so they can better understand their profit margins on projects. So their goal is to eventually get their hourly rate down, and that's how they want to compete for business, is by lowering their rate. And I was like, geez, it's shocking for the like level of this studio because they do insane work. I was like, I would honestly be trying to hike my rate and just get bigger contracts. But maybe I'm wrong. I feel like maybe I don't know something, but I feel like at that level, when you're doing like the baddest designs in the industry, then you shouldn't
If
start competing on price.
I think that like completely goes against like if you're making money already, like I feel like that goes against your business philosophy, right? Now you're competing at like what is it? Is it like you're like like you're competing on commodity versus like competing at like the value level or like what you're providing? Like if I was them, I would, like you said, either hike up my prices or like hike them, and then I would hire like a really solid sales team, and then just have them selling at the level in which they are selling your company. That's saying like we aren't just like, you don't want to be going after people who are like, I just want one thing and done, right? Like I want it done quick, I want it done okay. Like that's not, unless you're able to like become like the biggest like studios in the world where they're able to pump it out, then you can start competing on dollars and cents. But like until that point, I feel like you have to be going after the big fish out there, and like once you're going after the big contracts, big deals, you'll probably be the cheaper ones out of like those huge studios in the first place. So you're already coming in, and it's quite, with what you've been saying, it sounds like they already do great work. So it would, to me, it's like a sales issue. Like you're not able to pitch yourself as like this is worth the price, or you're not pitching yourself to the right people.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they have problems finding the right people. Like they get he was telling me their most recent one was like some vinyl company. They're like, yeah, they're like, we don't really want to respect any of the it's like alley. It's like the web rules for accessibility.
Oh
Um
yeah, yeah.
so it's like you need minimum like 16 pixel font, like all this stuff. They're like, no, we don't care about that. Like we just want a sick website. They're like, just make something dope. So they didn't have to respect any of those rules and just made something super cool. So they're getting high paying clients that want good design. And I was like, dude, I think you just keep like going down that path. It's like maybe instead of a sales team, you get featured in um, like niche designer like blogs, or like you do some like affiliate marketing and get yourself featured in like top 10 studios for whatever, um, and like start going down that path and really just get people who want the best, not because they need the best, just because they want it and they got money to spend.
Yeah, like I think that's like whether it's salespeople or you're like outbound marketing or like whatever your approach is, it sounds like you just need to get that studio name into more people's ears and their heads versus like trying to get a lower price. Like that isn't, I don't know, like to me like that's like seems like that's usually like a last ditch effort. Let me lower price. I feel like you have to like go down all these other avenues. Um Otherwise you're just gonna end up with like people, like your employees, feeling like disgruntled because they have to optimize everything they do. Like they can't, all they have to try to do is faster because we're trying to save every like dollar bill that they can. Like versus like a company that's always shooting for like the bigger fish, they might be like, who cares? Like let's just keep putting out great work. Let's obviously try to do it as efficient as possible and not be like be as lean if possible. But like you're always shooting for bigger and bigger things. So like let's just keep that on top of our heads and like go for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, especially after kind of our conversation last week, like to scale to not to scale. I was like, we never really talked about the method of, I mean, we talked about outsourced partners and that sort of stuff, but yeah, this method, I was like, this does not sound like a desirable way forward. It will work. I bet it will work, right? It's just not like the most entertaining way
And
forward,
you
in my
get
opinion.
and then you get picky clients too that are not
Yeah.
cheap, that are cheap, right? Like they're picky and they're cheap. They're not people you want around. They're like, why am I dealing with this person's BS? Oh, they're a customer. And then if you drop them, then they're gonna go around and be like, well, they didn't even do what I wanted them to do, and then they kick me out. Like that sounds awful. I
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I feel like you have to, if you owned like, I think like market share wise, do you think that 30 to like 40%, if you own that market, to go from like 30% market share to 40%, that's like where you would start cutting cost? Like I'm trying to figure out like what point do you start going after like reducing the price of like the products you offer?
Dude, well,
And do you think it's ever worth it? Like does Coca-Cola ever make their products cheaper? It's always like the same if not increasing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to think about like how a bigger studio would handle it, like Vaynerchuk Media or something. Like, do you think they compete on price?
No.
Like, they probably give you a number, and if you don't want it, they're like, okay, next. Because they got people lined up. You're right. Maybe it is a survival thing. Maybe it's a last ditch effort. I don't know. But
Yeah. The only people I know like that, only companies I know are like the consumer goods, where they're fighting for shelf space, right? Where they get put into the shelf, and then what does that little tag say? And
hmm
if your product doesn't fit into like that category of like people are like staring at your product versus others, and they're looking at price, then that's like a marketing and like branding issue, right? They're like, oh, but I get all this great stuff. Like it's the difference between Toyota and a Lexus. It's like, oh, but Lexus has this like mystique to it. It's like, more premium, like blah blah blah. Like they're the same thing, like, but that's branding, right? That's
yeah,
branding and marketing and how you're perceived, and that's why people are willing to pay more.
yeah, 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 I totally agree. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but we'll see. We'll see how it pans out, dude. Maybe they just start growing like crazy. I don't know. I'll keep an eye on them.
Okay.
But I feel good about this. Do you have anything else you wanted to run through?
No, I think that's it for me.
Cool. Well, I realize I've been saying like, comment, subscribe. That's under the assumption that we are catching you on YouTube. Hopefully, we're catching you on Spotify too, where you can follow us there. So we will see you next week. Peace.